The schedule is set for the voting time, and it's going on right now. You could be early voting as of, it was last week, I believe Thursday, when it technically started. All locations opening up in Mecklenburg County. I believe all the other counties, I would assume, are the same thing going on there as of yesterday. One of the referendums on your ballot in Mecklenburg County is the PAVE Act. And I haven't read the language of what is on the actual, the PAVE Act I've read.
We only have an hour, half hour left, guys.
Ballot, though. We've got two gentlemen here in studio. We've got Larry Shaheen, we've got Brian Sission. Larry Shaheen with the McIntosh Law Firm, Brian with the Range at Lake Norman. Also, private citizen. I do want to be fair to Bill Russell and be clear. Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce is not taking a position. You are the chair of the chamber, but this is you having a thoughtful discussion as a private citizen of the community.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay, absolutely. This has been a topic for a long time, gentlemen. 20 years ago, a lot of these conversations were taking place, and so now it's come full circle back. Larry, I'm gonna let you start on this. The PAVE Act. In essence, what are, from your perspective, is the decision for people to make at the ballot box this election season?
All right. So for all your listeners, they've heard me before, but I'll reintroduce myself. Larry Shaheen. I'm an attorney at the McIntosh Law Firm. I've been there for about 6 years, partner with Bob McIntosh. But in addition, I'm also a prior life, I was a political consultant. So for 8 years, I worked in Republican politics, running Republican elections, actually worked for the Sissons at one point, which was always a fun pleasure. And again, we're here as friends today. So we're going to have a fun banter and hope folks get educated because the goal is education here. We want people to be informed when they go vote. But the ballot question before the voters is for or against a 1% local sales and use tax in addition to the current local sales and use tax to be used only for roadway systems and public transportation systems. That's the actual ballot language. So it's taken us 5 years to get here. And the reason it took us 5 years to get here from the 30 years almost that it has taken up to us to get to this point is important. And I'm going to shorten it a lot because I want to make sure we have time for back and forth, but I don't want to leave out this important history point. For North Mecklenburg specifically, 5 years ago, Charlotte started talking about Charlotte Moves, right? And Charlotte Moves was a setup where there was going to be no road funding in North Meck. And there was going to be no red line guaranteed. Okay. 2.5 years went by. They got no traction of any kind, none whatsoever. All right. And till that time, up until now, for 28 years, North Meck has been paying a sales tax, a half-cent sales tax for nothing. And me and Brian can agree on that.
Absolutely.
They have been paying for nothing. So the question before the voters is this. After Charlotte Moves went away and it became the PAVE Act and the managers reconstituted it and came up with the new plan that prioritizes and makes the red line number one priority, and then puts 40% of the sales tax money into roads, specifically in North Mecklenburg, almost $1 billion in road improvements over the next year. I believe that the question before the voters, given that Charlotte compromised and came up with a solution that works for North Mecklenburg, in my opinion, Brian doesn't think it does, but I do. The question before North Meck is, are we going to vote no or against and keep paying a half cent for nothing? Or are we going to vote for this and begin the process of building the red line and getting the needed transportation improvements that we desperately need? I was driving down here and I thought it was funny because I saw signs that were like, we'll reduce congestion. There's only one way to do that, and that's to vote for this. So that's my short little synopsis of what we're talking about today. I know he's about to disagree with everything I say, which is a great part of America. We're good friends. We're going to shake hands when we walk out. But ultimately, that, in my opinion, is what's on the ballot.
Okay, Brian, from your perspective, if you would share from yourself and those you speak with in the community, what they're seeing this as and this opportunity in front of folks, whether to vote for or against.
Well, first off, the way the referendum is written is people are reading it as a 1% increase in sales tax. It's not. It's a 13.79% increase in the sales tax. We go from 7.25 to 8.25. We go to 9.25 on prepared food tax. You know where else you pay 9.25% on prepared food taxes? New York City. So we now have a tax rate that is equivalent to the tax rate of New York City. Yes, we need transportation fixes in this area. No doubt about it. Will the red line solve it? Absolutely not. Will we have a red line? Absolutely not. It's going to be more lies from the elected officials for North Mecklenburg to add an additional 200% over the existing half-cent sales tax right now. So it's just another way to kind of let the people in North Mecklenburg know that, hey, we're going to kind of appease you just a little bit. We're going to throw $5 million at the city of Cornelius for transportation needs every year. That $500 million is coming from a $210 tax on every citizen in Cornelius every year. $210 times 32,000 people. That's $6 million. Why aren't we getting $6 million if we're paying $6 million in taxes a year? It just doesn't make sense. There's other ways to let this happen to get transportation dollars. And this is just, and I know Larry hates when I say this is a bad bill for the citizens of Mecklenburg County.
There's been attempts of finding transportation solutions in the past. One being, if I'm understanding correctly, the last time that a sales tax increase was proposed in MEC, that those dollars, the conversation was that money was supposed to support transportation in some way, shape, or form.
So let's talk about that. Actually, let's talk about the history of sales tax discussions, and then let's talk about, because Brian and I were on the same side on several of these, and like the arts tax in 2019 and 2014, they tried to put the quarter cent up for arts taxes. Brian and I, all of us, were against that. Why? Because you don't do that. If our community wants arts, our corporate community can pay for that, right? That's an affordable thing. The corporate community and everyone else can get together and say, okay, that's what we're going to pay for. But no, in terms of how to pay for transportation improvements, okay? 1997, 98, half-cent tax for the system. 2007, repealed. Voters chose by almost 70% to keep the half-cent tax, all right? Now we get to where we are. So let's talk about transportation funding. Let's talk about solutions. I'm going to talk it very quickly. So Brian's correct. It's going to be $5 million a year, roughly, for the town of Cornelius. It's also going to get red line funding, which is going to be increased on that. So when you ask your question about where's the other million a year, it's going to be coming through red line funding.
Correct.
So that's where the money's going to go. So for the first time, North Mech's going to get a square deal. You're going to pay a penny, you're going to get a penny. And that's the way that it's going to happen. Secondarily, when you look at what the state and the feds are doing, the feds are unreliable in the transportation funding realm. They are no longer going to be able to put the big monies down because we have a debt problem, and we can't expect them to come to our saving grace. The state spends $2 billion a year in funding. We are capped at $650 million here in Mecklenburg County. We will never get more than that. We are in 2008. The Committee of 21 identified $12 billion in deficits in Mecklenburg County alone. Statewide, they identified $36 billion in deficits. We are never, even if they quadrupled the income tax, which God forbid, I hope they never do, because that would be terrible for North Carolina, we still would only get $650 million. Okay? So that's out. Mecklenburg County and thank God, Mecklenburg County, City of Charlotte don't have the authorization to do their own income tax like New York does. Okay, so that's not going to happen. And then ultimately, when you're dealing with how you pay for the other option on the table legally is TIFs, tax increment financing. But the problem with that is you need a guaranteed revenue source to be able to get it started. It's why the Panthers deal fell apart in Rock Hill, because the county and the entity couldn't agree on who would backstop and guarantee the bonds. So the fairest way to do this is a sales tax, primarily because 30% of it's paid for folks from outside of the county. 41% of that remaining 70% is paid by business. And then the remaining 58% is paid by individuals. So in reality, an individual in this county is only paying 58% all the individuals.
That's not true, because anything paid by a business is passed along to the consumer.
Not a sales tax, not necessarily, because sales tax is assessed at the checkout. It's not assessed at the price.
Correct. But the sales tax that the business is paying, trust me, I know this, the sales tax the business is paying is incorporated into the products that the business is selling.
Not the chairs that you're using, not the tables, not all the parts of the business that you buy.
I will totally disagree with you on that, because if I run a business and I'm paying $100 for this chair, I'm amortizing the cost of this chair over a period of time, and I'm building that amortized cost into the cost of my products that I'm selling to the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
So they're paying for the sales tax on the chair, not identified as a sales tax on their bill. It's built into the cost of the products that they're buying from the business. You cannot argue that.
But that's only on inventory. That's not necessarily on. It's the cost of doing business. That's a sunk cost. But they also get depreciation on that, Brian.
I understand, but the consumer is paying. There is not a tax that the consumer is not paying for.
Okay, so it's even then. So that's still so legally, there's only one way to pay for this locally, because if we wait. Let's say we say no. Okay. Let's say we say we're against. All that's going to happen is the traffic's going to get worse. All that's going to happen is congestion's going to get worse. And eventually, no one's going to come to our salvation except now it's going to be more expensive and we're going to be less able to make improvements. So from my perspective, when you're talking about what we're going to do, let's talk about Forbes just ranked Mecklenburg County as the second worst commute in the entire country. Second worst commute in the entire country. I drove up here. I came from South Park. The traffic was insane. And the thing is that, that's not going to fix the highways. But you know where else the traffic was nuts? As I drove down Catawba coming down here? There. You know what would desperately be great? Synchronized green lights, which is going to be expensive to pay for. And you know who currently runs that and can't do it? The state.
DOT. Yeah, we had that problem in Huntersville for years. And guess what? Huntersville hired a transportation director, got all the lights in sync because we took it over from the state. State gave it to us, said,
right.
Hey, go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
You know what it costs town of Huntersville to synchronize the lights?
Mm-hmm.
A half a person a year.
Mm-hmm.
Just to synchronize lights, and it gets traffic flowing smoother. There are other alternatives. The problem that we have is the local municipalities do not want to spend the time to identify what the other solutions are, to do the things that are necessary. We have a whole slate of elected officials, a whole slate of mayors, 3 mayors up here that are running that will all probably be elected.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully one of them doesn't, but I won't say which one that is. But will all probably be elected who have all said, if we don't get this, there is nothing we can do about transportation. Any elected official that goes into an office with that attitude, if this thing doesn't pass, should immediately retire.
I would love to have this
Immediately
conversation. I would
retire.
love to have this conversation. Okay. So you talked about the solution. So your solution is to take the existing property tax revenue and put it towards roads.
I'm not saying you take all the property tax revenue and put it towards roads, but City of Cornelius is sitting on a $50 million fund balance on a $32 million a year budget. What are we doing with this money? We're complaining about all the transportation problems we have, and we're sitting on $50 million.
Okay, but there's how much debt do they have? Because I mean, that's an issue that they have to keep a fund balance to be able to keep their AAA bond rating.
They have to keep 40% of their budget as a fund balance. Okay, $50 million is a lot more than 40% of the $32 million.
I don't disagree with you, but I'm a big fan of conservative government. So I mean,
well, you know I am too, Larry.
A lot of money in savings. I know you are. So it's interesting to hear you say you want them to spend down their fund balance.
You can't complain that we can't fix these problems when you're already sitting on taxpayers' money. And you're not spending it to fix the problem.
But this is my question. This is the part that when we go back and forth on this, that is so very important. Yeah, you can do that once.
No. You can do it continuously if you prioritize what the problems are.
But even so, the money that's going to come into the town of Cornelius, let's just use the town of Cornelius. You brought up the town of Cornelius in their $34 million budget. They're slated to get somewhere between $5 million a year. So $5 million out of their budget is roughly, let's do the math. That's what, 12%, 12.5%? Is that about right? Yeah. I think I'm maybe someone check my math on that. So you want the town of Cornelius to take out of their existing budget roughly 12%, because that's what we've identified as needed. 12% out of their budget annually, out of everything else that's there, 12% out of their budget to pay for roads. That's what you would do to fix this.
If that is the priority of the town, which we constantly hear from every resident in this town, is traffic is the priority. Mm-hmm. If traffic is the priority, the elected officials need to be fulfilling the priority of the citizens in their town. They just spent $4 million on a piece of parkland that could have become tax revenue generating property because they wanted more parkland.
Yeah, but that's the thing, though, is that, Brian, there was no public support for that rezoning. At Bailey Road. The voters won't let them do it.
I understand.
So that's my point. If it's not going to create tax revenue, how are we supposed to pay for this?
I understand. But why is the town spending money that could go to an intersection improvement to buy a piece of land that they're land banking?
Because that's what the community, when they came out and spoke against that initiative, trust me, I know my firm represented the seller.
I understand.
Fully disclosure that my firm represented the seller.
The community told them they didn't want that project there. It's fine. I disagree with them, but that's fine. They didn't tell them they wanted the town to spend $4 million to buy the land.
Actually, I think the refrain was a lot of, we want to park there.
No, that's not what the refrain was. It's not from a small
that was what I understood.
And you hear from a small group of people when anything like that happens.
Yeah, we have a small, that's right.
Okay, so you get less than 1% of the people saying, we want this to be parkland. You have the other 99% of the citizens in Cornelius saying, we need our transportation fixed. So you're going to spend the money on parklands instead of improving a road project?
We've got about 10 minutes left. One of the concepts I did want to get into as well is from this legislation in particular, since this is what the voters are voting on. And if this does pass, one of the parts is the relationship side with Charlotte. North Mech having a relationship with Katz, with Charlotte, the management of this thing. How does that go? That's a largely a big concern of folks is past history of management from Katz and from Charlotte has not been positive. Not very good. So how do we address that?
Let's go through that. So the first thing I want to address is the authority makeup, which I'm just going to go straight from the bill, which I have in front of me. So you've got an initial board of trustees that's going to be created. So everyone's done all the necessary steps to, if this is approved, to create the authority. So there's going to be an authority, which is best practices and transit policy across the country. I don't think there's a disagreement in that. I know that Brian has an issue with the composition in terms of how the towns are represented, but what I will say to this group is that the way it was structured was that all 8 of the managers all sat down of this region, sat down and negotiated this in collaboration and in good faith. And then 7 of the 8 local governmental bodies supported and endorsed this structure. So it's not like this hasn't been reviewed, and it's not like this hasn't been.
And was the one that did not support, was that Matthews?
Matthews was Matthews supported the structure. The only thing Matthews didn't support in the legislation was the tax rate and the plan that's not part of this. So that was the only thing that Matthews,
they lose their red line.
The only thing they didn't, because and we can talk through that in a minute. I want to close on that issue and why the red line is being prioritized and the silver line is not. So you got 6 from the county, 1 from each of the towns, and then 12 from the Charlotte. But the way the Charlotte appointments are that there's 3 guaranteed pass-throughs from the business community. Now here's the real catch. Most other transit systems in the country are elected officials appointed. You can look at Nashville. It's all the mayors and all the council members. There's no lobbyists. There's no lobbyist spouses. No elected officials. Members of the Board of Trustees shall have demonstrated experience or qualifications in the areas of law, finance, engineering, public transportation, urban planning, logistics, government, architecture, or economic development. So we have an expertise requirement. And that concept, and this is a big deal, experience requirement. The experience requirement makes it so that we actually, for the first time, are going to have very qualified individuals across all spectrums represent this board and run it. And we can all agree that the way that the MTC and the city coordinate, because the city basically owns the employees and owns the assets, the MTC through an interlocal agreement ran it. So that didn't work. This creates a new structure and a new authority, and it was a negotiated product. And the thing that authority is going to be governed by is a section in the bill, section 4.9 of the PAVE Act. Section 2, Brian and I have disagreed on a portion of this. The authority shall complete at least 50% of the red line as evidenced by a scope of work schedule created and submitted by the general contractor, construction manager on the project before the completion of any other rail project, absent the existence or occurrence of force majeure events that delay completion of the red line or make completion of the red line impractical. That section is what prioritizes the red line. So that's the basic structure. And as far as North Mech's concerned for the red line, that's the language that deals with. So that's what we're talking about.
Real quick one, and Brian, I'll let you go too. But one of the things I've heard is that, and I don't know if it's true or not, so that's why I'm asking the 2 professionals that know this kind of stuff. Can someone be removed? Can Charlotte remove any of the North Mech people if they don't like what they're doing?
Not at all. Okay. Only the appointing authority can remove.
Only the
appointing authority can remove.
Yeah, so Hunters will appoint somebody and they decide they don't like the decisions they're making, they can remove them and put somebody else in their place.
But Charlotte can't tell a North Mech person.
Charlotte cannot tell a North Mech person that.
Absolutely not.
No, but that's the structure.
And as you said, there are things that we agree on. And the couple of things that we disagree on is this 50% of the scope of work must be completed before they can do any other project.
Mm-hmm.
That's the language. That's the language.
Of a general contractor. It's not a scope of work of an engineer or an architect.
No, it's
a scope of work from a GC.
It's the scope of work of a general contractor. Okay. Yeah. Now, I've been project manager.
No, we've both done construction projects.
No, I've not construction. I've been in project management a good portion of my life. You can create a scope of work that identifies anything you want it to identify. Your scope of work, 50% of your scope of work could be, part of it is paying back Charlotte for the red line, for what they purchased, the O-line. Part of it can be the planning. You can have all of your planning done and your payback to Charlotte for the O-line, and you've now hit 50% of your scope of work, depending on how you define it. So now at this point in time, we got the planning done. Hey, we don't really need this line. Let's go over and get somebody else done. It's going to be games that are going to be played just like were played with the half-cent sales tax. Then you have the cost of this project. Nobody knows what this thing's going to cost. Larry and I have had arguments about this. We had an argument down in City Hall about this. They're saying $1.2 billion to get this project done. I've heard that $1.2 billion number for years.
It's going to be 1.2 to 1.8 to 6.
Okay,
to 2. Like I think that's the
to 6 is more
sorry,
right
2.
number.
2.
The city of Chicago is running a red line that they're building right now, which is exactly the same length as our red line. They had to purchase the track from Norfolk Southern to do this line, $6.4 billion to get their project done. Lines are already in place. They got to do stations. They got to bring the train in. So I'm not understanding how Chicago is going to be $6.4 billion in today's dollars. And 15 years from now, the red line is going to be $1.2 billion. It's not going to happen.
I think you know that Chicago's about corruption. I guarantee you 90% of that.
Charlotte's not?
No, actually, I got to tell you, there was a report that just got issued that was done by an independent law firm that said there was no corruption.
Yeah,
but let's talk
it was paid for by Charlotte. Well,
I don't disagree with that.
One more issue, because it's something that it's something that's in there, is the whole force majeure portion of this. At any point in time, anybody can say, we can't do this. And how are they going to say we can't do this? You said it a little bit earlier. We're not getting funds from the Fed. You can't do this project without federal funding or bonds being issued to get it done.
All right. Well, I'm happy to address that. So the fact that funds are not an issue, force majeure. So if you look at the definition of the force majeure clause that's specifically in there, it deals with that issue. So a force majeure includes fire, flood, earthquakes, other elements of nature, blah, 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 acts of the federal government, declared state of emergency, strikes or labor disruptions other than those specific other conditions beyond its reasonable control, to which reasonable diligence the authorities enable. They can get bonds so they can pay for it. Okay, federal government money is not required to pay for it, so they don't need the federal money. So when you're talking about half of the let's go with your budget number, 1.8 million, right? Let's call it that. You want to call it 1.8 billion. Let's go with 1.8 or 2. That's $800 to $900 million. There's no way that they can spend that on planning and engineering. They have to get to construction. They have to start building it to spend $800 million.
But they're not going with 1.8.
Well, even at 1.2, that's $600 million.
Oh, yeah, they could get there easily.
No, they can't.
Yeah, they can. Start acquiring land.
The $50 million.
Build the rail line up to the Charlotte city limits.
Let's use the $50 million. There's no way they're doing that. I can go on record and say that by the time I'm 50, this thing will be running. If we pass this. By the time I'm 50, I'm 42. I turned 42. I turned 42 on Wednesday. By Wednesday, this thing's going to be up and running. And trust me, he knows I'm an obnoxious SOB. If it passes, there's going to happen.
There's certainly a lot as it goes to the management side, right, in that relationship, and that's going to take years, right? That's going to be a constant. There's going to have to be groups watching and making sure. I have no doubt there will be. The other side, practically, that will hit the business owners quickly will be just that increase in sales tax. I do want to end our time talking about that. We got about 2 minutes left.
Yep.
Brian, your thoughts on that? Obviously, being a business owner, knowing what that's like. That concept of a tax goes up in MEC, will consumers then flee MEC to buy in other places? Thus hurting business owners.
It's an absolute possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but you're putting the businesses at a 2% disadvantage on sales tax to Lincoln County, Iredell County, and Cabarrus County. I'm not going to go South Carolina. I think York is 7%.
Something like that.
Yeah.
It's not that.
I'm down in Indian Land. Lancaster's 8%. And they're getting ready to go up. They like taxing us just like Mecklenburg County likes taxing us. But yeah, it puts the business at a competitive disadvantage to the surrounding. And it's, somebody going out and buying groceries. They're not going to change. They're not going to run up to Moore's.
Yeah, that's not going to change.
Groceries.
It's going to be no.
Somebody making a major purchase, instead of going over to the appliance warehouse on Bailey Road, they're going to run up to Mooresville because they're going to save 2% on their purchase. So and it may be small, but it's going to be a competitive disadvantage for the businesses in Mecklenburg County. And there is no arguing that.
No, I'm not going to argue that. But you know what? But here's what I'm going to say. Here's what I'm going to say again. I'm going to return to what we started with this. Okay. We have to decide as a community what we're going to be when we grow up. And Brian and I, and Justin, you've been a part of this community as long. Maybe you've been here. We talk through the funding issues. This is the part of the federal government where like we can look at the federal government as an example. We want all these things locally. We want good roads. We want good support solutions. We want good government. But at the same time, Brian and I are going to sit there and try and argue with everybody that we need to pay as little as possible. But I'm going to tell you that things cost money. And if we in Mecklenburg want to make a decision, and this is why there's a referendum. This is why nobody by fiat issued this. People get to make a decision. If the voters decide that we want to see a more robust transportation system, a more robust road network, a more safe road network with sidewalks and all types of things that we need. And by the way, we want more development. So if we want more development, the number one refrain from the anti-development people is we need congestion relief. We need more roads. So this solves for that, which allows us to do more development. I just think that if people are already going across the border to South Carolina to pay for things like gas, right? It doesn't really affect the gas stations in South Mecklenburg.
Well, it doesn't happen anymore either because they're paying the same thing down there.
Yeah, pretty well. And then that's kind of my point is that I think eventually knowing the transportation problems that Mooresville has and Iredell has, and if this passes and is successful, it will become a statewide initiative. Ultimately, their sales tax is going to go up too because they can't get funded through roads. I mean, there's a controversial road project that was just talked about that was funded with a special earmark that just happened in Mooresville.
And when it doesn't pass, it's time for officials to get busy and work to find the funds needed to improve our roads. It's time for them to go back to the legislature and go back to a certain senator from a county just north of us who proposed a 0.5-cent sales tax that was available across the entire state for transportation for every county in the state, but was told, no, we're going to run the payback first and let's see what happens with this. So the elected officials have got to say, when this fails, transportation is our number one priority, and we've got to improve transportation to improve the quality of life of people around here.
Yeah, but I'm going to say this, Brian. If we do it that way, eventually the state's going to get back into taking sales tax money away from the communities and moving it around. If Mecklenburg County's paying a specific tax, that's going to go all 100% into Mecklenburg County. We are in that moment in control of our destiny. And I think to a certain extent, if the towns want to be able to compete with Charlotte and be able to grow on their own, which they're going to, they've got to have the resources necessary to build out the road networks to accommodate for the 157 people moving here today. And because they're not moving to Charlotte, they're moving to the surrounding community.
Correct. And $5 million in Cornelius a year for roads will get one intersection project done a year.
Yeah, that's great. That's more than we've gotten done in the last 10 years.
So appreciate you both. Love the conversation.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
And I will say this, no matter which way voters decide, because voters do get to decide, and I love that about it. I'm so grateful for the leadership we have
Absolutely.
in our area to continuously keep North Meck in mind, not in Iredell and surrounding areas to Lake Norman, to Charlotte, thriving place to be, North Carolina as a whole, a lot of great potential for the future. Grateful for both of you and your willingness to come in and have the discussion today.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Justin.
it.
All right, we're going to finish out the week with Jason Drum,
Oh,
Drum
boy.
Landscape Supply.